the second chapter, second installment of our reflections on whiteness and its enemies as part of this larger discussion of why we should learn French, why Nick Fuentes can help us learn French, why he might learn French, and all in the aid of a thoughtful, restrained, humane, but informed and muscular discussion of the issue of whiteness and its enemies. This section will be titled Drilling Holes in the French Lifeboats, and it is a consideration of one of the most high-profile, flamboyant of Jewish French intellectuals. In this case, we're referring to The Adventures of Liberty by Henri-Bernard, Levi, a text written as a monument, reflective, tentative, joking, witty, but nevertheless a monument, a substantial book, reflecting on the failures of French intellectual life when confronted with the reality and legacy of the Shoah, of the destruction, or attempted destruction, of European Jewry under the Third Reich. Now, the book is extraordinarily vigorous and unsparing. Levi will set out attacking the obvious targets, the Dreyfusards and their successors, Barrès, Morat, and their successors in French life, leading down to Vichy, for their ethical failures, their complicity in the destruction of the civilian population of one of the largest Jewish communities in Western Europe, or attempted destruction. Then he proceeds and defines, the moderates, the people who were sympathetic to the hardliners, but not hardliners, finds their moral lapses, their anti-Semitic attitudes, their complicity. And then he proceeds on to the people who aren't obviously associated with the anti-Semitic campaign in France, for their neutrality and perhaps their hidden anti-Semitism. And you see where we're going with this. In the end, no one is spared. Everyone is guilty. Now, update this story, however slightly, 40 years or so, to the events of the past 2.5 years in Israel, Palestine, Middle East, Holy Land, and the conduct of the Israeli government in pursuing what it sees as a terrorist conspiracy against the survival of the State of Israel, in alliance, however fitful, with neighboring Arab states, let alone speaking nothing of Persia, Iran. And he has delivered a vigorous defense, Monsieur Levi, saying that what's going on in Palestine is not genocide and that Hamas must be eradicated, and this is the way to do it. Now this takes us back to our narratives. Levi knows his French history, and it's informed by a desperate determination to blame those who were culpable in the attempted destruction of French Jewry. And he's also immensely aware and sensitive to the needs of the Jewish people to have somewhere where they are safe. And given those two formidable pillars, at once emotional and practical, he then lays waste to the French intellectual tradition as best he is able. For 80 years, some version or not of this has been taking place. And the question now is, can it go on? And its ability to go on or not rests with those 2 points of view. One, that European culture, European political culture, European civilization, if you will, was culpable in the Holocaust, and therefore is guilty of any amount of moral critique, And at the same time, the survival of a Jewish refuge is so important that any method, any means, however brutal, may be necessary. Now, those two positions don't live well together unless you're Henri-Bernard or one of his supporters. Because if you're not part of that mental, linked up battlefield of desperate pursuit of national security, it ceases to be persuasive for some, perhaps many, perhaps most. Over time, for one, and the conduct of the Jewish government, the Israeli government in Israel and Palestine being another problem. To simply say, it's all right, doesn't cut the ice with a great number of people right and left in Europe. And that's not the problem, although that is a problem. But in the context of reading The Adventures of Liberty, Bernard Levy's attack on those critics of Israel who point out bad conduct, and then he goes back and talks about bad French ideas leading to bad French conduct. You see where this could come unstuck unless you're deeply committed to Levy's point of view. And it is Nick Fuentes, perhaps more than anyone else, in the United States at least, who has pressed his thumb on the sensitive point. Americans cannot be blamed for the Holocaust by their nationalist attitudes and then turned around and be told that Israeli national attitudes justify the court of things you're indicting Americans for. And that leads to this really difficult question. It comes up now, for example, in England, debating the place of European Jews, English Jews, if there's such a thing. Note the problem. In England, and in the fate of England. And this takes us back again to this notion of that there is no bolt hole for the English. There is no bolt hole for white Americans. The Jews have one. White Americans do not. The Jews have one, and English don't. And on this weak point, the ultra-nationalists are hammering to a considerable effect. Whether the effect will be enduring or not, it's hard to say. Whether the arguments bear careful examination or not is too early to tell. One can see weaknesses everywhere, but that's not the point. The point is the effect it is having on otherwise sympathetic opinion, otherwise people who have signed up for the 80-year post-Auschwitz narrative and now are beginning to have doubts. And badgering them and threatening them and saying you're a bad person may work up to a point, and then it'll stop working. With people like Nick Fuentes, it has stopped working. Tucker Carlson, it has stopped working. With the English equivalent of these people, it has stopped working. Something has died, at least to that extent. So, when we go back now and read Livy, and then read it against Houellebecq's submission, the reason that France surrenders to Islamic government is that it has been weakened by people like Bernard Levy. The moral will to defend France as France is not there in certain quarters. And so in the end, the whole edifice collapses because there's no fixed part that either has the muscle or the intellectual capability, resilience to resist it. And so in that sense, we can say that the long 80-year narrative post-Auschwitz has drilled holes in the French lifeboat, unintentionally, I think, in ways that I would have never considered. It's just not my way of looking at things. I am part of that 80-year-old narrative, formed by it, educated. The nuns who taught me in school insisted on it. We had textbooks, American history textbooks, in which every chapter had a sidebar which highlighted worthy Protestants and worthy Jews in the American experience. This is in a Catholic school. Now, when you're educated this way, the nationalist argument Nick Fuentes strikes implausible in every way, shape, and form. I mean, not only bad, but implausible. But the marks are there. The bite marks are evident. The bruises are evident. The suggestion that the Israeli government has so much control over the American government that it serves Israeli interests over American interests, I mean, that kind of argument is just dynamite. And the way it's being fought doesn't strike me as effective. So we'll see. But now we're at this point where lifeboats and drilling, and who's going to have to stop drilling holes if they're to survive and we're to survive. But I think we're getting to the point where that we comes up. And of course, the most awkward question of all becomes this business of hyphenation. Italian Americans, Irish Americans, African Americans. This is the way the American experience has tried to deal with this. And the white nationalists aren't having it. Eventually they'll come to the point where they'll say, no, there are no more hyphenations. There are Americans are not Americans. In the English case, as far as I can tell, there are no such thing as a black Englishman. Black British, Jewish, Englishman. Really? The nationalists don't think so. So all of a sudden there's a distinction here between Jews and English, Jews and Americans, Muslims and Americans. Which is it going to be? The whole notion of dual citizenship comes up here too. But in the end, we're going to have to think very carefully about what national identity means and requires. Already on the English right, and agree, there's echoed on the American right, the notion of mass expulsion, forced departures of millions of people to keep the United States white and to keep England, England. Now, when you get to France, it's interesting. The French do not accept hyphenation. You're French, and that's it. You may be from North Africa originally. You may be a Breton. You may be Russian immigrants' children, but you are French now, and there are no hyphenations. Now, that's thin. It's not plausible. It has thin bits that don't quite convince. But you can see, as a solution, it points to where America would like to arrive at. Again, the French got there first. So, another reason to learn French. Onward.